The sharp smell of spilled whiskey mixed with stale cigarette smoke hung heavy in the wide air as Elena Russo wiped down the sticky bar top for the last time that night. Her lower back throbbed with a dull, constant ache that reminded her she wasn't built for this life. 3 months ago, she'd been standing in front of 22nd graders, teaching them how to sound out words and tie their shoes. Now she was serving drinks to men who looked at her like she was part of the menu, not the waitress. The neon sign outside Noir Lounge flickered erratically. Red, blue, red again, casting strange shadows across the empty bar. It was 3:47 a.m. The last drunk had stumbled out 10 minutes ago, leaving her alone with the mess and the silence. Elena hoisted the last bar stool onto the counter, her arms trembling with exhaustion. That's when she saw it. Tucked beneath the velvet cushion of booth 7, half hidden in the shadows. A wallet, not just any wallet. It was black leather, the kind that felt expensive even from a distance. Thick, heavy, out of place in a dive like this. Her fingers hesitated before picking it up. In this neighborhood, wallets didn't get left behind by accident. But her father's gambling debts didn't care about her suspicions. $200,000. That's what they said she owed since he disappeared 6 months ago. Her hands shook as she opened the wallet. The breath left her lungs in a rush. Cash. Not just a few bills, but thick stacks of $100 bills rolled tight and bound. More money than she'd make in a year. For one wild, desperate second, she imagined it. Taking it, running, disappearing like her father had. But the thought was like a splash of ice water. She couldn't. She wasn't him. Elena searched for an ID with trembling fingers. No driver's license, no credit cards, no pictures. Just a single matte black business card nestled in the front slot. Embossed silver letters that caught the dim light. Matteo Dante. Below it, a phone number. Nothing else. The name sent a chill down her spine like someone had dragged ice along her vertebrae. She'd heard that name whispered in the 3 months she'd worked here. Conversations that stopped abruptly when she got too close with a drink tray. Men who paid in cash and left through the back door. Her hand reached for the bar phone, sticky from 100 hands before hers. She dialed with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. It rang once. A voice answered before the second ring could start. Deep, dark, like smoke and broken glass. Yes, I found a wallet, Elena stammered. At Noir Lounge. Does it belong to Matteo Dante? The silence on the other end was absolute. So complete, she thought the line had gone dead. Where exactly are you? The voice was quieter now. More controlled, somehow more dangerous. Noir Lounge. On 5th Street, she whispered, though she was alone. Stay exactly where you are. The line went dead with a soft click. Elena stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, her heart hammering against her ribs. She just invited a wolf into her quiet, desperate life. He arrived 45 minutes later. Not with noise or fanfare, but with a presence that seemed to suck all the sound from the room. Elena heard the back door open. The one that was supposed to be locked. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. He stood in the doorway like he'd materialized from the shadows themselves. Tall, broad-shouldered enough that he filled the entire frame. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp jaw, high cheekbones that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. Dark, almost black in the dim light. Like storm clouds heavy with lightning, promising violence. They found her across the empty bar and locked on with the precision of a predator spotting wounded prey. He moved toward her. Each step silent despite his size. Smooth, fluid, predatory. 2 large men flanked him, staying by the door like sentries. Elena's throat went completely dry. You're the one who called. His voice was even deeper in person, resonating in her chest. It wasn't a question. She could only nod, not trusting her voice. She held out the wallet with a hand that trembled visibly. Her fingers brushed against his as he took it from her. A jolt shot up her arm. Like static electricity, but hotter, more dangerous. He didn't even glance at the wallet. His eyes stayed locked on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. You didn't take the money. It wasn't the question. It was an observation laced with disbelief. It wasn't mine, Elena said, finding her voice. Something flickered across his stone-like face. Amusement, maybe, or surprise. An honest woman. He tilted his head slightly. A rare thing in this city. His gaze traveled over her slowly. From her worn-out sneakers with the hole in the left toe, up her faded jeans, over her stained Noir Lounge t-shirt, to her tired face. She felt naked under that stare. Like he could see right through her clothes and skin to everything beneath. Every unpaid bill, every sleepless night. Every desperate prayer whispered into the darkness. You work here, he stated. It pays the bills. She lifted her chin slightly. Not enough, I think. His eyes lingered on the frayed collar of her shirt. He was quiet for a long moment. I am a man who repays his debts, he finally said. I own a club, Obsidian. You may have heard of it. Elena's heart stuttered in her chest. Everyone had heard of Obsidian. The most exclusive club in the city. I need someone I can trust at the door, he continued. A hostess. The pay is 5 times what you make here. 5 times. The number hit her like a physical blow. That was enough to make real payments on her father's debts. Enough to actually breathe for the first time in 6 months. But the way he looked at her, the danger that clung to him like expensive cologne, this wasn't just a job offer. It was a trap dressed in silk. I don't know anything about that world, she said carefully. You'll learn, he said simply, as if it were already decided. Why me? The question came out before she could stop it. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because you gave back $5,000 when you desperately needed it, he paused. That kind of integrity is useful to me. The rent was due in 3 days. Her cupboards were empty. The debt collectors called every single morning. Okay, she heard herself whisper. His dark eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. Good, you start tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, don't be late. Then he turned and walked away, his men following like shadows. Elena stood alone in the empty bar, clutching the edge of the counter. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that her life would never be the same. Obsidian was a different universe entirely. All black marble and gold accents that caught the light like captured stars. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Elena would make in a lifetime. Men in suits so expensive she was afraid to breathe near them. Women in glittering dresses that hugged every curve. Elena stood at the entrance in a simple black dress they'd provided. Elegant, tailored, probably worth more than her rent. But she still felt like an imposter. And everywhere she went, she felt his eyes on her. Matteo sat in a corner booth on the upper level, separated from the main floor by a wall of one-way glass. His throne, from where he could see everything but remain unseen. Always watching. His gaze followed her as she greeted guests with a smile that felt painted on. As she guided them to their tables with a grace she didn't feel. He never approached her, never spoke to her directly. But his attention was a constant heavy weight pressing down on her shoulders. 2 weeks passed in a blur of expensive perfume and hushed conversations. Then one night, everything changed. Elena was guiding a group of businessmen to their reserved table when the front doors didn't just open. They exploded inward. 6 men stormed in like a wave of violence and rage. Hard faces, harder eyes. They weren't there to drink. Chaos erupted in seconds. Glasses shattered against marble. Women screamed. Men shouted. One of Matteo's security team went down with a grunt, blood spreading across his crisp white shirt. Elena stood frozen in the middle of the floor, terror rooting her feet to the spot. One of the invading men, his face twisted with rage, charged toward the upper level, toward Matteo's booth. He saw Elena in his path. Didn't hesitate. Grabbed her arm with fingers like steel bands. Threw her aside violently like she was nothing. She cried out, stumbling, bracing for impact. It never came. Strong arms caught her mid-fall. Pulled her against a wall of solid muscle. Mateo. He'd moved faster than should be humanly possible. One arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her behind him. His other hand held a gun. Black, deadly, aimed directly at her attacker's head. The world narrowed to that single moment. The deafening crack of the gunshot, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the iron grip of his arm keeping her safe. It was over in seconds. Mateo's men handled the rest with brutal efficiency. The music started again almost immediately. Nervous at first, shaky, but it started. Mateo turned to face her, his eyes blazing with something dark and possessive. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her through a door marked private. Down a hallway she'd never seen before. Into an office that screamed power and wealth. He slammed the door shut behind them. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. She shook her head, trembling from head to toe. "Listen to me, Elena." He stepped closer. "This is my world. You saw nothing tonight. Do you understand? Nothing." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. "But they saw you. They saw me protect you." Tears burned in her eyes. "What are you saying?" He looked at her then. Really looked at her. A storm of conflict raging in those dark eyes. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I brought you into my light, and now you're standing in my shadow. Your life is in danger because you're near me." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "There's only one way I can protect you now. Only one reason that makes sense in my world for me to guard someone so closely." Another pause. His storm-dark eyes locked with hers. "You will marry me." The penthouse was a beautiful prison. High ceilings that seemed to stretch up forever. Windows that offered a view of the entire glittering city spread out below. Furniture that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Elena was given her own room, far from Mateo's. Down a different hallway. A clear line drawn in stone and silence. She was his wife in name only. The fight started almost immediately. "You can't just order me to stay inside all day." Elena's voice echoed through the vast living room. Mateo stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her. Posture rigid, unmovable. "It's for your safety." "This isn't a discussion, Elena." "I'm not your prisoner," she fired back, storming across the room to stand in front of him. She wasn't afraid of his scowl anymore. How could she be? He'd already done the worst thing imaginable. He'd stolen her life, her choices, her freedom. "You are my wife," he said, turning to face her finally. His voice a low, controlled growl. "That makes you my responsibility. In my world, that means you follow my rules." "Your world is a nightmare," she shouted. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Not anger, something else. He took a step closer, looming over her. The air crackled with new tension. Not just anger anymore, something electric. Something dangerous. "It's your world now too," he whispered. His gaze dropped to her lips for a single heartbeat. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone. A week later, he informed her they were going to a party. Not asked, informed. "It's important," Mateo said. "We need to look like a real, happy couple. Can you do that? Stay close to me, don't wander off. Just smile and look content." The party was at a rival family's estate. Even more opulent than Mateo's penthouse. Marble columns. Crystal everything. Elena held onto Mateo's arm, her smile feeling painted on. She felt the stares immediately. Heard the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. "That's Dante's new wife. Used to work at Noir Lounge, I heard." Then a man with slicked back hair and cruel eyes blocked their path. Vincent Rossi. The son of the man who'd murdered Matteo's brother 5 years ago. Matteo, Vincent said, his voice dripping with false warmth. I heard you picked up a stray from one of your clubs. He looked Elena up and down slowly, like she was livestock being evaluated. Cute, he continued. But tell me, does she know which fork to use for the salad course? Or should we have the kitchen send out a spork? Laughter rippled through the nearby guests. Cruel, mocking. Elena's face burned with humiliation. She opened her mouth to respond. Matteo moved first. He didn't shout, didn't raise his voice even slightly. But the air around them went dead cold. In one fluid motion, he stepped directly in front of Elena. His hand shot out and gripped Vincent's shoulder, knuckles turning white with the force of it. You will look at her, Matteo said, his voice so quiet it was more terrifying than a scream. With respect. His grip tightened visibly. Vincent winced, trying not to show pain. You will speak to her with respect, or I will remove your tongue and make you swallow it piece by piece. Do you understand me? He leaned closer. She is Elena Dante, my wife, and she is worth more than you and your entire bloodline combined. The silence that followed was absolute. Vincent nodded shakily, his face pale. Scurried away the moment Matteo released him. In the limousine on the way home, the silence was heavy. Charged, Elena stared at Matteo, her heart pounding wildly. He'd been absolutely terrifying, but he'd defended her. Claimed her in front of everyone. Thank you, she whispered. He turned his head slowly, the city lights flashing across his sharp features. The cold mask was gone completely, replaced by raw, burning intensity. No one insults what's mine, he said, his voice rough. He reached out, his movements slow and deliberate. His fingers traced along her jawline with a gentleness that seemed impossible. It was the first tender touch he'd ever given her. A shiver ran down her spine. Then he leaned in, closing the space between them. His lips met hers. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. A crash, fierce and desperate. A fiery release of all the anger and tension and forbidden attraction that had been simmering between them. His hand tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his jacket. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathless. The hatred was still there between them. But now it was tangled up with something else. Something hot and burning and impossible to ignore. Something fundamental shifted that night. The walls between them developed cracks. They stopped yelling quite so much. Started actually talking instead. Late one night, unable to sleep, Elena found him in his study. A single lamp lit the room, casting long shadows. An old, faded photograph sat in his hand. She saw a younger Matteo in the photo, actually smiling. His arms slung around a man who shared his dark eyes. Brothers, obviously. My brother, Matteo said quietly, not looking up. Luca, the name hung in the air between them. Murdered, he continued, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. 5 years ago, by the Rossi family. Vincent's father pulled the trigger himself. They took everything from me that night. Suddenly, the cold crime boss was gone. In his place sat just a man. A man carrying a weight of grief so heavy it had frozen his heart solid. She saw the lonely boy who'd had to become a monster. She understood, for the first time, why his protection of her was so fierce, so absolute. It came from a place of having lost everything once before. That understanding changed everything between them. The penthouse no longer felt quite so much like a prison. It started slowly to feel like something else. His presence was no longer just a threat. It became comfort, safety. One evening, they sat together on the large sofa, closer than they'd ever been before. He was telling her a story about Luca. Something silly from when they were kids. A real smile touched his lips as he talked. Elena reached out without thinking, placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. He went completely still. His dark eyes lifted to search her face. The look in them wasn't cold or angry. It was full of deep, aching want. Elena, he breathed her name like a prayer. When he kissed her this time, it was completely different, slow, deep, thorough. A question asked with lips and tongue. And her answer was to melt into him, her arms winding around his neck. He didn't lead her to her room that night. He led her to his. That night, their marriage stopped being just a show. In the darkness of his bedroom, surrounded by the scent of him, they gave in completely to the burning attraction that had been there from the very beginning. It was real, passionate, all-consuming. As she fell asleep in his arms, Elena let herself believe something incredibly dangerous. She let herself believe that he truly cared for her. That this insane, forced beginning could somehow, impossibly, lead to a real forever. The change in Matteo Dante after that night was quiet, but profound. The man who once spoke only in cold commands now asked for her opinion. The storm in his dark eyes had softened, always seeking her out when she entered a room. He laughed now, a real, deep sound that made Elena's heart soar. The penthouse was no longer cold and silent. It filled with their shared jokes and conversations that stretched late into the night, with the smell of meals they cooked together, with the warmth of a real home. One evening, curled together on the sofa, he traced lazy circles on the back of her hand. "A boy," he murmured thoughtfully, "with your kind eyes and gentle heart." "Or a girl," Elena replied, her own heart swelling, "with your stubborn chin and protective nature." They were talking about the future, a real future, together. About family, about love, about forever. She had fallen completely, utterly, helplessly in love with her husband. The former teacher and the mafia boss. It was no longer a forced arrangement. It was a true love story. She had forgotten completely that he'd ever been her enemy. That beautiful illusion shattered into a million pieces on a Thursday night. Matteo had arranged a large family dinner. The long dining table was loud and warm with his men and their families. Elena sat beside him, her hand firmly held in his larger one. Feeling for the first time in her life like she truly belonged somewhere, the front door didn't just open. It exploded inward with a crash that silenced every conversation instantly. Police officers in full body armor swarmed into the room. "Matteo Dante, you are under arrest for the murder of Vincent Rossi." The world slowed down to a crawl. Elena watched in absolute horror as they roughly pulled Matteo from his chair, violently yanking his arms behind his back. He didn't fight them. His eyes found hers across the chaos of the table. But they weren't warm anymore. They were shattered. Filled with a pain so deep it physically hurt to look at. He looked at her not with love or trust, but with heartbreak that spoke of the deepest betrayal imaginable. "Elena," he whispered, barely audible over the noise. The single word a question that broke her soul into pieces. She could only shake her head violently, tears already streaming down her face. "No," she choked out. "Matteo, no. I didn't." But he was already being dragged away. His final devastated look branded itself into her memory like a scar. He believed she had done this. The evidence, they said afterward, was perfect. A tip had come from a source very close to Matteo. Someone with intimate knowledge of his schedule, his movements, his security. Elena was destroyed. A ghost wandering the halls of the suddenly freezing, empty penthouse. But her love for him was stronger than her grief. She worked desperately, frantically, calling every lawyer she could find, trying to track down any clue, any thread, any tiny detail that could lead to the truth. Everyone believed it was her. The police saw a trapped wife seeking revenge. His men saw a traitor. No one would help her. No one would even listen. In desperation born of love and fury, she broke into his private study one night, a room she'd always respected as his alone. But she had to find something, anything. Her fingers trembled as she searched through desk drawers, finding nothing but business papers and receipts. Then, almost by accident, her hand brushed against what felt like a solid panel at the very back of the lowest drawer. It gave way with a soft mechanical click, a hidden compartment. Her heart pounded with sickening dread as she reached inside. Pulled out a single, slim manila folder. She opened it with shaking hands. The air left her lungs completely. Photographs. Dozens of them. All of her. But not from Noir Lounge. Not from after she'd found the wallet. These were older. Much, much older. There she was leaving her elementary school, laughing with a colleague she hadn't seen in over a year. Here she was at her favorite coffee shop, reading a book, completely unaware of being watched. In another photo, she was walking through the park, earbuds in, lost in her own world. The dates stamped in the corners were from over a year ago. Long, long before she'd ever found that wallet at Noir Lounge. Her eyes fell on a final document tucked into the folder. A typed report on her entire life, her habits, her work schedule, her financial situation, her father's gambling debts down to the exact dollar amount. At the bottom, in Mateo's distinct, sharp handwriting, was a single handwritten note. The wallet is the perfect approach. She's too honest to keep it. We'll force the meeting. Proceed. The truth crashed down on her like a building collapsing. The lost wallet wasn't an accident, wasn't chance or fate or luck. Their entire meeting, from that first moment in the bar, had been carefully constructed. Orchestrated, planned, executed with precision. He hadn't fallen in love with her over time. He had seen her, decided he wanted her, and methodically manipulated every single event to trap her. The wallet, the job offer, the attack at Obsidian. The forced marriage, all of it, every moment, every touch, every whispered word. Planned from the very beginning, he had hunted her like prey, stalked her for over a year, studied her until he knew exactly how to catch her, all while pretending it was fate bringing them together. The real betrayal wasn't hers. It was his. The man she loved had never been real at all. And the baby growing inside her, the one she'd discovered just that morning when the test showed, 2 pink lines would be born from the biggest lie of all. A beautiful, devastating lie that had trapped her forever. What would you do if you discovered your entire love story was a lie? Could you ever forgive such a beginning?